What's up, guys? I just wanted to talk about my experience with the Arc Division Sparc V1 compensator. I've been running compensators now for the last year. I have been running the Arc Division dual port on my G17, but that doesn't get as much range time as it used to. So I've been using the Sparc MV1 on my G19 that I pretty much use for everything with check clear, right? With the Arc Division barrel. So Arc Division barrel, comp, and I've had about 7,000 rounds through this G19. This is my Gunco built G19, and pretty much the only thing that's not Gunco on here is the Arc Division barrel and Sparc compensator. So the reason why I wanted to do a review on this is because compensators are very popular nowadays. They're kind of the hype. And I get it because I've been running compensators now on my G17 and on this G19, and like I said, I'm at 7,000 rounds with this one. And there's definitely a difference in recoil, overall shooting ability and feel. Like I'm a little bit faster with follow-up shots with this. As long as you have a good grip, it benefits you a lot to have a compensator. So I totally get it. In terms of give and take, pros and cons, I wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that they are temperamental. So compensators are temperamental. So even though you're gonna get it and it's gonna kind of flatten the recoil a little bit, it's gonna be noticeable using both compensators that I ran, but I'm gonna be talking mostly about the Sparc V1 today for 9mm. Using both of them, it was definitely noticeable, the recoil. Maybe not with one shot, but if I'm doing, 5 reload 5, 3 reload 3, things like that, I've always had a really strong grip, so I've never really had an issue with like a stock Glock. But with this compensator, I must say I did like it better. It was easier. It is what it is. Like compensators make the gun a little easier to use if you know how to use a gun, right? So is it a positive thing that I would suggest to people? That depends on who you are and what your purpose is, right? I always suggest if somebody's carrying for like home security, self-defense, or concealed carry, I always suggest something that's closer to a stock factory Glock. I'm only going to talk about Glocks today because that's really all I care about. And know about really, but I would suggest like a G45 or a G19, G48, 43, closer to stock rather than modifying them. But I will say this particular G19, like I said, I've been running it through everything, and it's held up. It's held up really well, and honestly, for the fact that I've modded the trigger, not the trigger bar, just the trigger shoe with the train with purpose trigger shoe. I've done everything else that Gunco makes for it, like the slide and the magwell and things like that. It's held up really well with very, very little issues, really at all. The only issues I've had actually tied to the compensator, so that's why I wanted to talk about that a little bit. Are you gonna get performance out of it? Yes. But I actually didn't pick 7,000 rounds as a magic number because I felt like that's just what I was thinking. No, it was actually, I'm gonna run this thing really hard doing my day-to-day stuff on the range, at events, or just my own personal training. And when things start to get kind of weird, then maybe I'll start picking a number around there. Pretty much around 6,000 rounds, I started having consistent issues with it. And I think that's important to talk about because a lot of people love the Gucci Glocks. They love modifying things. They love seeing 44% less recoil. That's a random number, but people say shit like that when they sell compensators, right? And yeah, dude, it does work. But what they don't talk about is that it took me shopping for 5 different recoil springs for it to stop malfunctioning right when I bought it, right when I installed it. And the gun on its own, the G19, beforehand, just built by Gunco, had 0 issues before I added the compensator. Okay, and that was with the Arc Division barrel before the compensator. So after adding the compensator, I started having recoil issues. And I knew that right away because you have to change the recoil spring. It was starting to stovepipe and not locking the battery. And I was like, okay, I knew this was going to happen with the compensator. Let's buy an assortment of springs. So I went with Glock Store, Terran Tactical, and Factory. I did 14 pound, 15 pound, 16 pound springs, captured and uncaptured. And the only spring that seemed to hold up really well with my G19 with the Sparc V1 compensator was the Terran Tactical 15-pound captured spring. So there's captured, there's uncaptured, which is kind of odd to me because my G17 with the dual port Arc Division compensator worked flawlessly with a Terran Tactical uncaptured 15-pound spring. I don't really know how much that matters, but I will say that it was weird that that same setup on my G19 didn't work out very well. It was very inconsistent. Now, once I found the right recoil spring to run well with this setup, I had zero issues for about 5,000 to 6,000 rounds. And then around 6,000 rounds, I started to get consistent stovepipes. And I started to notice that my guide rod was poking out a little bit more, to where I almost questioned when I'm like, hey, did I put like a G17 guide rod in here and I didn't know it? Or when somebody was messing with one of my guns, because I have a ton of friends that we always work on guns together and things like that. I was like, did somebody end up misplacing one of their G17 guide rods and ended up in my gun? I actually checked it, and what ended up happening is the Terran Tactical guide rod shimmied loose. There's an Allen screw that screws onto it to capture the spring. That actually started loosening up, and the gun still ran with the recoil spring malfunctioning and working its way out, but it also started stovepiping a ton. Every single time I shot it towards the end of the magazine, it started stovepiping, and that wasn't what I was seeing the previous 5,000 rounds. So I realized, okay, I'm somebody who likes to run my stuff hard. I don't clean my firearms very often. Usually what I do is I'm kind of a dirtbag, and I just throw some grease in there where I know that there's a lot of wear, whether it's on like the frame where the slide connects or around the barrel, things like that. That's generally what I do. But for this review, I decided, okay, it's starting to have consistent malfunctions every time I use it now, and it wasn't the previous 5,000 rounds. How about I completely do a full strip down of the gun, I clean it, and then I put a new set of lube, make sure that there's no excuses. I purchased a brand new Terran Tactical 15-pound captured guide rod, the one that worked best out of all of the guide rods I used, recoil springs, that I used previously. So I went out to the range and I made sure that everything was a perfect scenario. Once I did that with the new recoil spring, I ran 115 grain ammo, which is what I generally run 90% of the time. Sometimes I run 124, and I ran 124 today. And I also ran 147. I know it's very popular with compensators. So I went through 115, 124, 147, shot 147 over the last 7,000 rounds the least, mostly 115. But I pretty much found that it was still stovepiping with a clean gun, with brand new recoil spring. It was starting to stovepipe every other magazine for the first 100 rounds with 115 and 124. After shooting about 100, 150 rounds, all the stovepipes went away. I don't know if the spring just needed to settle in or something. And all the 147 grains had zero issues in terms of malfunctions, but they obviously didn't feel as easy to shoot. My grouping was a little bit less tight. Wasn't huge, but less malfunctions with the 147. So I think I did what was necessary for this test. I've shot this gun in the rain, in the mud, in the dust, the dirt, different climates, mist, with this compensator barrel, same gun company build, and I ran it through its paces. And I guess I'd have to say that, is the compensator an upgrade? Yes. Am I going to continue to use it? I wouldn't on something that you're carrying daily. Now, will this live on this gun any longer? I don't know. I like it, I enjoy it, but I want to say I liked the reliability and the fact that I didn't have a hot muzzle, a really hot muzzle, because that compensator gets hot, exposed out of the bottom of my holster, or just in general. I didn't like that as much as having just the Arc Division barrel with no compensator on it. With this particular G19, I might end up going back to just Arc Division barrel with no compensator. And I would suggest that for anybody using in a self-defense situation, probably closer to just a stock Glock. Maybe just that and a red dot. I wouldn't mess with things like this. But if you're somebody like me who likes to test gear, because every advantage is something that you should utilize, but also you got to think about reliability and things like that, right? It's up to you if you want to do what I did and play with different recoil springs and then go shoot a ton, and maybe outside the waistband this compensator is going to work great. It actually worked just fine inside the waistband with the right holsters, but it did get hot quick, like I said, so it became uncomfortable after a few magazines. I don't know, I think that's generally how I feel about it. Again, I'll probably end up taking it off. I don't have a lot of complaints, but I don't like how I have to worry about if it's malfunctioning because the compensator, or if it's the recoil spring. I don't like having to worry about all that stuff. And even though it added performance, I think that my grip and my own shooting ability is good enough to handle a G19 without a compensator. I mean, we are shooting 9mm most of the time. So it's up to you to decide. Arc Division makes great stuff. I have a handful of their products, but compensators in general, if you're gonna run them, don't shit on the companies unless you really do the work on the consumer end to give it a true opinion. I've shot with people who've shot compensators from other companies that are like, this is shit, but they kept like the stock recoil spring. Probably not smart. That's not really the company's fault if you ended up shooting it once and you didn't really give it the best situation to do well in. That's on you. But I did everything I could for this compensator in terms of different ammunition types, 7,000 rounds, and like I said, I'm confident in my skills as a shooter, so I'm probably going to end up taking it off. Hopefully this helped you guys. I'm going to try to add value any way I can through Train with Purpose, and let me know what you guys think about this. Peace.